Okay, well, to our speakers, the ones present, and the nearly 60 registered participants that have joined us, to our YouTube live audience, Miriam and Jesse from Brussels and Tirana, welcome on behalf of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development and CEPS, the Center for European Policy Studies in Brussels, to this webinar on key reforms on Albania's pre-accession track. Over the next 5 quarters of an hour, we'll focus on justice and energy. This webinar comes 2 weeks after the European Commission presented to the Council its draft negotiating frameworks for Albania and North Macedonia, which established the guidelines and principles for the accession negotiations with each candidate country. So congratulations to the Albanian government and to the Albanian people for having reached that milestone. The objective of the negotiations is, of course, that Albania adopts the EU acquis in its entirety and ensure its full implementation and enforcement upon accession to the European Union. The draft negotiating frameworks build on the experience of past enlargements and the ongoing accession negotiations with Serbia and Montenegro. And they integrate, in fact, the revised enlargement methodology. They take into account, of course, the evolving EU acquis and duly reflect the country's own merits and specific situations. And credibility is a big keyword in the European Commission's lingo over the last couple of years. The accompanying messages by the Commissioner stress that credibility is reinforced through an ever stronger focus on fundamental reforms, starting with the rule of law. And in fact, this harks back to a strategy document from February 2018, which is titled A Credible Enlargement Perspective for an Enhanced EU Engagement with the Western Balkans. A document, in fact, where the Commission does not mince its words. Taking, an overall look to the Western Balkans, it says, and I quote, today the countries show clear elements of state capture, including links with organized crime and corruption at all levels of government and administration, as well as a strong entanglement of public and private interests. And so it stresses in that document, as it does in more recent ones, of course, the need for a strong focus on the rule of law. Now, in the meantime, Albania has taken a hit twice, literally, of course, with the earthquake of late last year. And then in the first half of this year, as the rest of Europe and the world, the COVID-19 crisis. And as forecasted by the EBRD, the COVID crisis will hit the Albanian economy the hardest of all Western Balkan country, which is due to structural weaknesses, of course, limited by high public debt and low fiscal revenues. The Albanian government is providing comparatively less direct support to its economy. The IMF has predicted that due to the earthquake and the COVID-19 crisis, the country's public debt will rise with 10% to 75.6% of GDP. And that public revenues will be at least 15% lower to the initial planning for 2020. And we've seen the IMF, but also the EU, of course, step in with all kinds of emergency support packages, both in grants as well as loans, of course, a redirection of IPA 2 funding at the very beginning. I think this paints a challenging backdrop to the start of Albania's opening of accession negotiations. We're very glad to have with us 3 and hopefully 4 key speakers, all women. I seem to be the excused man on the panel, a role I'm happy to take on. But we have 3 key stakeholders in this process to enlighten us on several of these aspects. And of course, explain to us what Albania has done and will do or should do in the future. Now with us, we'll hear first from Minister of Justice of Albania, Etilda Gjonaj. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Your name. You've been appointed in your current post in May 2017. In August 2017, after a brief stint as Deputy Minister of Justice, before which you were 3 years one of the 3 commissioners of the Office of the People's Advocate. So welcome to you. We will then hear from the Minister of Infrastructure and Energy of Albania. Welcome, Belinda Balluku. You've been appointed Minister in January 2019, and prior to your appointment, you were Director General at Alp Control, which is the air navigation services provider of Albania. At Eurocontrol, in fact. So welcome to you. And after that, we will hear from Charlotte Ruhe, who's a Managing Director for Central and Southeastern Europe at the EBRD. You've been with the EBRD for quite a number of years and were before Director within the SME Finance and Development Group, providing finance and advice to SMEs across 26 EBRD countries, and also a director for Croatia in Zagreb between 2005 and 2010, and in fact now beaming in from Croatia. We hope to still welcome also to the panel Isabel Santos. If she joins, then I will introduce her at that stage. So with that, welcome everyone again. Etilda, can I ask you for your introductory remarks, please?
Thank you, Mr. Blockmans, Excellencies, distinguished participants that are hearing in this webinar. It is a pleasure to be here and speak about the progress of Albania that has made in its EU integration path by fulfilling the key priorities set by the EU Commission and having finally received in March this year the green light to open accession talks. Let me make, and I want to do it to make it clear from the beginning that we are all aware that one of the most pressing issues for the Albania was of a rule of law, and especially the functioning of the judiciary. However, it should be noted that in the Western Balkans, rule of law issues are issues embedded in the political, economic, and social structure of our countries. Strengthening the functioning of the judiciary, rule of law, or creating an independent and impartial justice system is no easy matter and cannot be achieved within a few months' time. The EU and the US are a vital force in sharing the burden of reforms in Albania, while we are prepared to implement critical reforms without EU influence and support, as it is shown during the political discussion on constitutional amendments on justice reform in Albania. And it is difficult to see how deadlocks on judicial and other rule of law issues could be resolved. The prospect of EU accession is the driving force to undertake these reforms. Hence, however far in the future, this prospect must remain real and credible for local population. In March this year, Council decided to open accession negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia. To Albania, this was a long-awaited decision, and it was perceived as the reward of implementation of critical reforms to consolidate an independent and impartial judiciary. The government of Albania sees this process as a journey of transformation and a possibility to further implement critical reforms that will ultimately make Albania part of a joint European family. Inviting Albania to the negotiation table will increase pressure to further reform and increase accountability in the implementation of reforms. Under the guidance of these processes, the government will be in an even better position to drive the reform process at home, and the European Commission will have more leverage over our reform processes legally and politically. I strongly believe that Albania is a front runner in the region in undertaking critical reforms to consolidate an independent and impartial judiciary, and in our fight against corruption of all forms. Despite the criticism that may surround the power of EU to export rule of law in the accessing countries, especially nowadays, Albania can be considered a successful case study of the transformative power of EU. Albania has undertaken a major justice reform as part of our commitment to consolidate rule of law. And as the Minister of Justice, I am pleased to state that we have undertaken one of the most comprehensive justice reform in the Western Balkans, unprecedented and unparalleled in our efforts to give to our citizens an independent, accountable, and impartial justice system. And it is not said by me as Minister of Justice or by government of Albania, but it's said by, and it's mentioned by European Commission. We have redesigned the governing institutions and the functioning of the justice system in Albania. The justice system is governed now by two councils as self-governing bodies in charge of career, accountability, and the overall function of the system. Through our justice reform, we have depoliticized appointments in the justice system, no more political interference in the appointment of high court judges, and we have limited the role of the Assembly in appointing member of the Constitutional Court and the High Justice Inspector. This is in charge of disciplinary proceedings against judges and prosecutors. To strengthen the independence and lower political influence in the appointment of lay members of the Council, the constitutional reform has foreseen a pluralistic composition. There are lawyers, law professors, civil society representatives, high voting thresholds. The Assembly approves the list of candidates by 2/3 of all members, and an established process for their nomination, which is as important as the method of their election. We have guaranteed a better separation of powers. The Achilles heel of the former organization of the justice system was accountability of judges and prosecutors and the exclusive role of the executive and in holding accountable judges and prosecutors. The role of the Minister of Justice as the exclusive body to propose disciplinary measures against judges cemented a culture of non-accountability in the judiciary and dangerous political influence. And to dismantle the culture of non-accountability in the judiciary, a new constitutional body was created, that is High Inspector of Justice, totally independent by the Minister of Justice, independent by the Assembly or by the government. The Office of Inspector, led by a strong and independent High Inspector, will eradicate non-accountability from the justice system and will help keep the system in check from falling back to its former state. Additionally, through design the powers of the President of the Republic and Minister of Justice in the justice system, we have managed to reduce political influence significantly. Most of the powers of appointments, transferments, promotion, and budgeting have been shifted to the new Governance Council, and hence guaranteeing better separation of powers, stronger check and balances, and a more independent judiciary. Lastly, an extraordinary measure that aimed to restore proper function of the rule of law, the independence of the judicial system, as well as to reestablish the public trust and confidence in these institutions, we put in place a transitory vetting system for all judges, including judges of the Constitutional Court and High Court, all prosecutors, including the Prosecutor General, the Chief Inspector, and all other bodies and subjects that are perceived as corrupted by citizens. The results of the justice reform so far have been impressive. Around 267 judges and prosecutors have gone through the vetting process so far, out of 800 subjects in total. More than half of judges and prosecutors that went through this process were dismissed due to unjustified assets or connection with illegal connection with organized crime. Both councils, as independent bodies, are working in full capacities to guarantee an independent and impartial judicial system. And in the short period since their establishment, they have adopted all necessary bylaws for the proper function of the system and are working daily for improving the efficiency and accountability of the system. A special court and prosecution office for the fight against corruption and organized crime, that is called SPAC, have been established, and they are fully equipped to deliver on the long-awaited promise to eradicate the culture of impunity in Albania and to hold accountable every public official that commits a criminal offense. Lastly, during this year, we will see the full staffing of the Constitutional Court and High Court with professional and impartial judges, and hence will finalize the overall surgery that the justice system is undergoing. There is still a long way to go, but we have had concrete and measurable results which emphasize not only the political will, but also the full commitment of Albania on fighting corruption, implementing justice reform, and restoring and consolidating the rule of law. The reform path is not easy, as the resistance to the justice reform clearly shows, but our determination remains unwavering. The implementation of justice reform is in an important phase, and at this stage, the support of EU institutions is vital. We need this support, and we need to work closely together in an effective and productive manner. The opening of the negotiations is just a symbolic decision for Albania that the path towards EU passes through reforms. And we all know that the process of opening the accession negotiations does not give any guarantee that you will become a member state sooner or later. And we have examples how far a country can go from EU, and it does not abide to respect of democracy and rule of law. As our presence here shows, we are determined to strengthen and intensify the efforts in order to advance our EU-related reform agenda and deliver further tangible and sustainable results. Concluding, I want to thank you all organizers for this organization of this meeting, and of course for supporting Albania in the path to transformation to a market economy and rule of law state. Thank you.
Faleminderit, Minister Gjonaj. We take good note of the innovations, both in an institutional and procedural sense, that have been adopted, taken, and introduced over the last couple of years. And also your point that one of your opening points, in fact, that the rule of law and reform efforts in that sector are embedded in the socioeconomic structures of the country, which I think is a linking element, good governance, essentially, that leads me to Minister Balluku, but not before welcoming to the webinar Isabel Santos, member of the European Parliament and Rapporteur for Albania. Welcome to you. I've introduced all other speakers, but we look forward to hearing your comments as well at the end. With that, Minister Balluku, the floor is yours.
Good morning, all. I will start by wishing that everyone and their families are doing well during this challenging time. I also thank you for the invitation to this webinar as an opportunity to present Albania key achievement and path toward reform and EU accession. The main mission of the Albanian government and the Ministry of Infrastructure and Energy, of course, is the social and economic development of the country and the improvement of our citizen quality of life. But what is equally a mission and a dream for Albanian is becoming part of European family. This has been both a driver and a catalyzer for the reformation path that Albania government has undertaken. I'm very proud to state that we have been committed to the energy reform from the beginning. We have been engaged with all our full capacity and believe that the results speak from themselves. The liberalization of the market is one of the fundamental requirements of the European community in order for the Albanian market achieving greater transparency, liquidity, and of course, decentralization. It also the milestone that will allow Albania to be fully integrated to the regional and EU energy market. In this regard, I am pleased to report one of our greatest achievements, the legal and functional unbundling in the distribution system operator. As of the 1st of January 2020, the 3 incorporated daughter companies created from the unbundling process are carrying out their activities as follows. The universal service supplier take it with a task with electricity supply of end customer operating in the regulated market. The free market supplier, which carries out the purchase and management of electricity and operation in the free market. As well, the third one, the distribution system operator, with the activity of electricity distribution and the construction, operation, and maintenance of the electricity distribution infrastructure. Moreover, we have accomplished the unbundling in the transmission system operator. We have fulfilled all but one of the conditions for this certification, which is the setup of operationalization of the Albanian power exchange. The first step toward is the establishment have already been completed, and we are now at the stage of selection of the participant in the market operator's capital, which is subject to an open tendering procedure called early this year, and the evaluation of bid is still ongoing. In terms of regional connectivity and in the framework of Berlin process, we are further developing power interconnection lines. Albania has already functional power interconnection line with Greece, with Montenegro and Kosovo, and it's currently developing them with North Macedonia. This project is part of the European Commission initiative to establish an east-west electricity transmission corridor between Bulgaria, North Macedonia, Albania, Montenegro, and Italy. I cannot leave without mentioning the massive improvement of the level of grid loss and the rate of bill collection. In 2013, less than half of the distributed and billed energy was collected, and grid losses was about 45%. In 2019, receipts increased to the level of 67.8 82 billion compared to 38 billion Albanian lek in 2013. So we have doubled the money collection. We have worked to reduce losses in the distribution network from 45% in 2013 in 23.95% in 2019, steadily approaching the requirement and standard of European Union. Investments in electricity infrastructure have also increased to 76.5 million euros for 2019, compared to 490,000 euros in 2013. All these figures point to the fact that our energy state-owned enterprises are better governed and more financially disciplined right now. Today, due to our maximal engagement and the support of all the international partners, which I take opportunity to thank, we have created a sustainable democracy, a transparent framework that has made Albania attractive for foreign investors. Our energy strategy is to achieve enhanced energy security of supply by developing reliable, sustainable, efficient, and friendly environmental domestic energy sources. The Karavasta PV Park auction is the best example for this. And I want to thank you in this point, EBRD, for all the support and the help that they have gave to us during all the process. The procedure for this auction was fully competitive, transparent, and conducted in accordance with the best international tendering practice. 30 international companies purchased the tender documents, and despite the difficulties created by COVID-19, of course, 5 bids were submitted. The auction resulted in a record-breaker bid with the price of 24.89 euro per megawatt by the French company Voltalia, one of the biggest companies in Europe regarding the renewable energy, which was less than half of the amount of the selling price, so the medium selling price that we have during the year compared with the import and the country generation is about 15 euros per megawatt, and we have achieved this price of 24.89 euros, supported by a totally European company, French one. This is an exceptional achievement for the Albanian energy sector and a win that we share with our partner, of course, as I mentioned before, EBRD, which supported us in every step of this way. And following our success collaboration on the solar energy auction, we are very enthusiastic to take our partnership one step further and work together again in order to launch the first ever wind energy auction in Albania very soon. Regarding renewable energy, growing political commitment as well as the introduction of clean energy policies has driven the growing level of activities in the sector. In terms of regulatory frame, we are currently reviewing and amending the Law number 7/2017 on the production of the use of energy from the renewable sources to ensure the renewables integration into the market and to achieve full alignment with the relevant European Union directives. Meanwhile, a high point for both the Ministry and the Interest Group was the approval in 2019 of the facilitation procedure for the authorization for the connection of the distribution system of small renewable project solar electricity generated by self-producer. This opened the way for small and medium companies, as well as householders, customers, to produce electricity for their needs, with the possibility of injecting the excess of electricity into the grid. One other point very important for us, and one other requirements from the side of European Union, of course, it's the energy efficiency, a crucial component where we have focused our efforts. We are very pleased to have completed last year the rehabilitation of the dormitories of the Student City 1 and Student City 2 according to the energy efficiency principle, including interior restoration and kitchen equipment. This was a project financed by KfW, and 1,000 students benefit from it. Meanwhile, this year, the Albanian Energy Efficiency Agency conducted the very first testing and certification of energy auditors, which marks a very important step in the sector and will finally allow a large energy consumers to comply with their legal obligation in the relation with energy efficiency. What I just present, it's only the tip of the iceberg. And underneath lies an exceptional amount of work, of course, supported by our partners financially and with the know-how, which is very important for the Albania, which is now in the first steps. We are very committed, and our efforts of the government, of the ministry, and all the partners to drive the reform of the energy sector forward. Even though that acknowledge it's more work to be done, of course. The recognition we received by the Commission during the European Union and Albanian subcommittee meeting last month was the best reward that we had for what we have accomplished so far, and the motivation to continue the reform for a European future for my country. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you very much, Minister Balluku, also for giving us a better insight as to the reform program that your government is pursuing in the area of energy efficiency. In the meantime, we have opened via the chat box and the Q&A section of the Zoom platform, where we welcome basically your questions. I see them coming in, so thank you very much for that. Minister Balluku, thank you. You provided a perfect segue to a presentation by the EBRD. Ms. Ruhe, I'm interested, of course, to hear what the EBRD's priorities are in Albania and how they tie in with the country's journey towards e-membership. But in particular, I'm also interested in your assessment of the impact of the COVID-19 crisis in Albania and any advice the EBRD would have to the authorities in terms of unlocking economic recovery.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you, Ministers Gjonaj and Balluku, and pleased to have the opportunity to be on this platform together with you, Your Excellency, Ms. Santos. Justice and energy are key reform areas in Albania's path towards EU integration, and we are very pleased to continue through this webinar our partnership with CEPS after the very successful event hosted last year for North Macedonia. The issues covered during this discussion are priorities for the country at many levels, but I will focus here on their impact on the business climate and economic development, which are at the core of EBRD's mandate. Starting with the justice reform, this has deep implications for a number of key concerns that have consistently emerged in business surveys over the years. These concerns include the ability to resolve commercial disputes efficiently through the courts and the lack of certainty over land property rights. These are fundamental issues for any business, but are particularly hindering Albania's ability to attract foreign investment and the potential for the multitude of micro and small enterprises, which form the backbone of the country's economy, to grow and to formalize. While the justice reform itself is not a core area of engagement for EBRD as a bank, we will continue to provide a sounding board for its impact on the business community through the Albanian Investment Council, which is the leading platform in the country for structured public-private sector dialogue on issues pertaining to investment climate. In addition, as a new judiciary system emerges from the reform, we stand ready to support the training and professional development of judges, for example, on issues related to banking and commercial law. The energy sector is a strategic priority for EBRD in Albania. We are very pleased with the fruitful collaboration with Minister Balluku. There are two areas I would like to touch on. The first relates to the sector-level reforms required to align Albania with EU directives, increasing market liberalization and financial discipline in the energy sector, as well as the regional connectivity. The minister has already described these, but I would just like to note that we have supported them through a set of conditionalities attached to our landmark loan to KESH, the power generation state-owned enterprise. We are satisfied with the progress made on a number of areas, including strengthening the governance and management of this important company. The completion of unbundling, specifically between supply and distribution, is the next big step on the path of energy sector reforms. We are committed to continue backing this process and to step up our financial support for the enterprises in the energy sector, including where needed, by providing emergency funding to bridge liquidity gaps caused by this COVID-19 crisis and to keep the vital infrastructure for the country going. The second relates to renewables and the green agenda. Albania remains almost entirely dependent on hydropower generation in terms of domestic production. During dry periods, this exposes the country to costly imports from the region, often of fossil fuel generated power. Therefore, diversifying into other renewables is a very important priority to reduce the country's exposure to climate change and to increase its resilience. We are very proud in this respect of the landmark tender described by the minister for the first large-scale solar project that we substantially supported in preparing and conducting earlier this year. This has delivered excellent value for Albania, generating the lowest price for solar power in the region, and it has also attracted to the country a global renewables operator, mobilizing much-needed investment and skills. I think this demonstrates the value of properly prepared and transparent processes and establishes a blueprint for more of these tenders to take place in the years ahead. We look forward to continuing to support Albania on renewables, including by replicating this successful partnership in solar and in solar power to develop also the tenders for wind power in line with best international practice. If we look forward, we see that Albania has suffered more than other countries in the Western Balkans due to the unfavorable combination of several factors: the importance of tourism for its economy, its significant exposure to Italy as a key trading partner, and the fact that it entered this crisis on the back of last November's earthquakes, something you touched on earlier, Stephen. Hence, our current base case forecast is for a 9% drop in GDP this year, but to be followed by a rebound of 12% in 2021 on the assumption that trade and travel returns to normal. Of course, that's a big assumption, and we don't know for sure whether that will happen. I think I'll save the rest of my thoughts for the Q&A and now turn the floor back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charlotte. And in fact, I see that in the chat box and the Q&A, questions are already coming for each of you. So perhaps you can have a look at that before I throw them at you. But first, Isabel, welcome back to a CEPS event. Very glad to have you. From the European Parliament, you've been following, of course, Albania much closer. Also in light of the European Commission's new negotiation framework and aspects of rule of law, which feature very prominently in there. I'd be keen to get your thoughts on the process and individual aspects that you may have picked up during the debate so far.
So, good morning to all of you. I'm very pleased to be here and to have this opportunity to talk with this so interesting panel of participants. As you know, my role as rapporteur, it was a little bit difficult during the last months because I don't been able to visit and to go so many times as I planned to Albania. But despite of that, I'm following the situation in Albania, and I'm working truly on the process. What is interesting for me is to see how much the Albanian people is engaged on this process. And from my previous visit to Albania in the beginning of the year, I could see that I could see the will of the Albanian people to continue on the path of the European Union integration. Some polls showed that it is the most pro-European country in the region. We must find together a way to respect this feeling and work to achieve all the goals on the accession process. This is something very important that we cannot waste this will of the Albanian people in this accession process. This is something that we must protect in any conditions. The areas we are focusing on today, justice and energy reforms, are very important, and as you have listened before to the speeches of both the Minister of Justice, Mrs. Etilda Gjonaj, and Minister of Infrastructure and Energy, Mrs. Belinda Balluku. The government of Albania is taking seriously the efforts that need to be done. Let me assure you that also the European Parliament and the European Commission are following very closely the implementation of the much needed reforms in this area. We believe that the accession process must be achieved in a solid and consistent way, and I must underline this, in a solid and a consistent way. Justice and energy are two of the main areas in which Albania needs to focus on to continue this process, and the reasoning is, as always, very clear. These are areas that affect very directly not only the functioning of the country, but also the daily lives of these citizens. As I'm used to say, we have to look at the reforms as not only important to the European Union accession, but especially to the improvement of the Albanian people's life. I'm glad about the recent developments in justice reform the conclusions of the Venice Commission allowed to unblock some of the issues, and hopefully by the end of the year the Constitutional Court will be running and vetting of judges continues to go smoothly. These are two important signals when we know that the rule of law is one of the main chapters in the accession process. I must underline this. As for the energy reforms, I'm glad about the progress made in renewable and gas sectors. And I'm from a country where strong reform on renewable energy is a good example of what can be done and what must be done. And for that, I'm really happy when I see good efforts and good examples, and I see things going on. However, I must also stress that some progress in electricity market reform must be done, and I'm waiting for that, and I'm sure that the minister will do the best to achieve her goals and the goals of Albania in this sector. There are still some very key areas in the energy field that need some attention and the adoption of secondary legislation. There are still a lot of work to do, but the easy tasks are for others. The not so easy tasks are for us, and Mr. Belinda, I'm sure that you will do what it's needed to do. I would like to finish because I'm a rapporteur. I'm not going to do my report today in this meeting. It would be very interesting, but it's not the moment. I would like to finish saying that I'm very thankful for this opportunity to discuss these matters with everyone here today, and that I believe in the accession process and the ability of Albania to reach its goals. For that, we need cooperation of all the political actors and from all the organizations and players in the country. This will be an effort, and that has to be made by all to the benefit of all the people in Albania. I'm very confident in this process, to be very frank, and I'm really believing that the path, as it was said by Minister Etilda Gjonaj, it's not easy, but it's something that is in front of us, and together we will be well succeeded on this task. And as I heard, talking in external investment, that is something very important for the country. I think the reforms that are being made, not only in justice, but also in the economical field and in the energetical field, they can give the confidence to the external investors to go ahead in their projects in this country that need too much to have this effort, to have our help, and to have our focus in one vision of future. Thank you to all of you. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Your last words touch upon the red thread, of course, that runs through all of the presentations and forms the backbone of this webinar, which is good governance. or put negatively, the fight against corruption. And so as the questions come in, I think they're neatly divided into three baskets. I think I will follow the same structure or sequence, at least, of speakers, and maybe turn to Minister Gjonaj first, with a question by André de Munter, which takes the big picture at first, which is essentially public distrust as of citizens, Albanian citizens, in the court system, which, according to the Balkan Barometer of 2020, shows that, despite the enormous efforts made, still 79% of respondents totally distrust or tend not to distrust, not to trust, rather, the courts, with only 15 trusting. What will be your reaction to that? And maybe in combination with, of course, some of the institutional innovations that you've already highlighted, where Alfredo Rizzo of INAP asks, for a point of clarification on the competences of the higher authority that you mentioned in justice reform and its relationship to the judiciary and the government, and specifically whether that would also be a body to entertain complaints on any misuse of power on the judiciary's part. And I think a third question in this respect points to the vetting process that you've alluded to. It's, of course, heartening to hear that the composition of the Constitutional Court and the High Court would be filled up again by the end of this year. In the meantime, despite successes of the vetting process, several dismissed judges have launched proceedings before the European Court, pointing out, among others, that members of the vetting committee have been unlawfully appointed and that the process is controlled by the Parliament, which is not usual in the European Union. This is a question from Charalampos Kontonis from the European Parliament Working Group on the Western Balkans. Perhaps you could take those three aspects in your reaction. And I would like you to ask you, in the interest of time, to be brief.
Thank you, Mr. Blockmans. Thank you, Ms. Santos, for the good words and for trying to understand how difficult it is even for Albania. And of course that I want to thank you even Ms. Ruhe, not only for her words, but even especially for the suggestion and for trying to coordinate and to work jointly on the training of judges and the prosecutors, especially on the fields of the economy. Of course, it is the School of Magistrates that now it's operating more than 20 years here in Albania, that do the continuous training for judges and prosecutors. And of course that we can work together in order to try to have these themes, especially in combination and in cooperation with you, for the plan of training sessions for judges and prosecutors. And of course that it is needed. So thank you for your suggestion and offering the cooperation in this field. Meantime, I want to try, I will try to briefly answer some questions. Of course that, first of all, I want to touch a little bit the public distrust that it was touched as a question. But of course that this public distrust, it was the main reason why the justice reform it was approved and why we have chosen to change the justice system, because the public has had no trust to the system due to corruption, due to illegal decisions. And of course that it must have and it must need some time, because now we are trying to put the seeds in the earth, and we have done that. And after that, of course, that we have to wait some time to profit the fruits. But of course that we are in the right direction. It is difficult to change the perception of the public just only in 1 year or immediately. Of course that the public will build the trust in the moment that they will see the efficiency in the justice system, and not just only looking the institutions that have been established, the new one, or the pillars of the independence, or the results of the vetting process, that of course that has built some trust to the citizens, but the real trust of them, it will be in the moment that they will see the efficiency in the justice system. And this is comprehensive, that will need some time. But the main thing that we have even to think about this system is that the main pillars and the main institutions to guarantee the independence, fighting corruption, fighting impunity, are there, and they are doing their job in order to achieve as soon as possible the results that all these citizens are expecting. Meantime, it is true that in some barometers or in some reports, it is said that the trust of the public is lower, but meantime, even in the recent report of OECD, it is mentioned that it was published in July for the region. It was mentioned that Albanian citizens' trust is increased with 3% to the justice system. So it means that, of course, that we will have some time to have all the results that we need. About the idea that, of course, the business has to have their assurance of the efficiency of the justice system in order to increase the investments in the country. It is, of course, the main issue that we have discussed even with the chambers of commerce here in Albania. And we are trying even to address their complaints or their requests, not that are linked with the justice system in itself, overall, but even the complaints that they have about the corruption. Since the Minister of Justice is even national coordinator of anti-corruption, we are not just only implementing the plan of actions or strategies, cross-sectoral strategies that are in papers, but we are achieving good results, especially on fighting corruption in the public administration in one hand, and on the other side, it is the vetting commissions that are doing in the justice system. So, of course, that good results have been achieved. It is a little bit time, it is needed time to change the mentality and the perception. But of course that we have had really good results on increasing the trust of the citizens and their perception that how they see the measures that the government is taking about fighting corruption. And this is a good track. Meantime, about the complaints of the citizens towards judges or prosecutors. Now with the new system, it is the High Inspector of Justice, as I mentioned, that is totally independent by the government. Partially in the past has been part of the competence of Minister of Justice and High Judicial Council, but now is totally independent. So each citizen that has a complaint can address that to the High Inspector of Justice about, and the High Inspector of Justice can take an investigative disciplinary investigation for the judges and the prosecutors. And then there are...
who appoints the members of that inspectorate?
The High Inspector of Justice is a monocratic institution that is composed by different other inspectors. And the High Inspector of Justice is elected. Actually, it is a procedure that is totally transformed, and it is a process that it's done by another independent ad hoc institution that is called Justice Appointment Council, that is composed by judges of different levels and prosecutors of different levels, and they do all the verification and the screening of the candidates for High Inspector of Justice, and then they send to the Parliament, to the Assembly, just only the 3 best candidates, and the Parliament has to elect one of these 3 that has been ranked by the independent body that is Justice Appointment Council, and the Parliament has appointed the first one that has ranked by Justice Appointment Council. So the Parliament has this role more as a notary, despite that it is called the appointment body, but it is more than as a notary to notify and to do the appointment of High Inspector of Justice. But all process, it's done by this independent institution. So each citizen that has a complaint can address this complaint to High Inspector of Justice. Meantime, all these institutions and all the process that we are implementing for implementation of the justice reform are monitored, and we are working together with the international missions of EU, that is Euralius, and international mission of USA, that is OBDAT mission. So they are monitoring, they are helping, they are assisting technically. So everything it is done in a ground that cannot be or cannot move from what it is foreseen in the Constitution and in the package of the legislation.
Okay.
And if you allow me about the
very briefly,
the last question that is about European Court of Human Rights. It is nothing mistake to have different complaints or application in the European Court of Human Rights. This is, and this shows that how we have guaranteed the due legal process for the vetting process for the judges and the prosecutors, and everybody, even them that have been discharged or that have been dismissed, or as the same as all citizens, they can send cases for due legal process or for every kind of article that is in European Convention, in European Court of Human Rights. But it's just only the guarantees that we have offered in the legislation for the due legal process. And I think that is very positive.
Okay, thank you very much for those reactions. I want to follow up with a number of questions to Minister Balluku. One more general question is from Willem Struben at the Partnership for Transparency, who asks about the extent to which the EU's environment and climate change policy requirements are taken into account in your actions. More specifically, and I think going back to the issue of addressing poor governance, i.e. corruption, would be the link made by Mr. Contonis to essentially public-private partnerships and concessions in the hydropower sector, where a boom of PPP was enabled through amendments made to a law on concessions and PPPs in 2014, 2015, and where a mechanism that awarded a 10% bonus for unsolicited proposals by private entities in the sector has been heavily criticized also by the European Union. Yet instead of removing, the 10% bonus for those unsolicited proposals, as requested by the Commission at the time, the ruling coalition did precisely the opposite, which means that the Parliament has expanded the 10% bonus for unsolicited proposals to all areas of the law, and hence allowed for this boom of lucrative PPP and concession contracts to a network of clients. So on those 2 points, Minister Balluku, what would you react?
Thank you. I will start from the first question, which is the hydropower issue in Albania and the climate, of course, change issue, which is very connected on this. As you said in the beginning, I was appointed in this position by January 19, and the first thing that I have done by 31st of January 19 was a decision to block every process or contract of hydropowers. The small hydropowers, 2 megawatt, spread in all the country. And we have built a very good process of scanning this situation, because you have to understand that Albania, the Commissioner Santos have said before that Albania is totally depending from the hydropower generated energy. So, of course, we have scanned everything. We have done a very good dialogue with all the citizens in the rural places when this, where this license are issued for the construction of hydropowers, and more than 50% of these contracts are now terminated because they was out of the legal frame and out of the technical frame, which was more important. The government of Albania is very engaged to create and to regulate all these hydro plants that are licensing from 2009, to tell the truth, not only 2014. 2014, 2015 was just about 54 license, but we have 490. And if you take count that from January 19 until now, me and the administration here in Ministry of Infrastructure and Energy, we don't issue any license. So all the rest of 440 hydropower was licensing during 2009-2014 without any study and without any control, creating a very bad situation regarding the potable water and the water used for agriculture. We are very engaged, and many times we have found ourselves in very hard confrontation with the companies that are entitled of this license, and maybe Charlotte from EBRD knows very well our fight during these last 2 years. To tell the truth, Albania is a pearl of Balkan, and one of the most solid pillars of our economy is tourism. Of course, energy is very important, but it has to be produced in the right way, based on study, based on business plan, and without negatively affecting the people's life. So for us, the tourism is very important, and so all the focus of resolving this very old problem from 2009 till now regarding the hydro plant, I believe now it's in the right path. This is about the hydro plant, but let me set another.
Can I make this link immediately to Charlotte, because in fact there's a follow-up question that immediately links to what you have just said.
Absolutely.
I'll come back to you. No, I'll come back to you after.
No, so just telling that Albania is working very hard for the diversification of sources. So not only the hydro plants to produce energy, but the solar or the wind too.
No, I mean, that's very clear. You mentioned that in your introductory remarks. Thank you. But the link I wanted to make with Charlotte is is pointed out, in fact, by Ardian Hakai from the Cooperation and Development Institute, a think tank based in Tirana. And the Ministry of Infrastructure and Energy has just finished, he points out, the preparation of rules of procedure, including integrity compliance articles and a new code of ethics. And he makes a link with the EBRD's own transition report 2019-2020, which puts good governance in the title, and asks how can the EBRD practically support and capitalize on that good alignment of good governance reform stars, as he quotes from that report.
Thank you very much. It's actually a very nice question. And first of all, I would like to share with the audience the conclusion of our transition report study on governance is that improving governance is so important, not just for improving economic growth, but also for improving citizens' satisfaction with the country where they live. It's important for bringing people who have left the country back to the country. It's important for keeping the young and educated in the country once they have finished their education. And for EBRD, our strategy for Albania, our new strategy, which was just approved by our board a few months ago, actually has governance as one of the 3 key pillars, improving governance across the economy. So our modus operandi is based on a combination of policy engagement, investment, and technical assistance. And the work on solar energy that I touched on earlier is exactly an example of that. We work together on the policy side. We are providing the government technical assistance to make sure that they have all the support that they need. And then we invest when the project is ready. We are open to explore other areas where this same model could be applied, and this could be part of a structured exercise to identify EU accession reforms that could most benefit from this approach and lead to a memorandum of understanding with the government of Albania, framing the cooperation between the government and the EBRD's support. We would like to work together on this with DG NEAR, and we plan to reach out to the Albanian authorities in the coming weeks to engage on this. I can say we only haven't done it up to now because of first the earthquake, then the COVID. We know that they have so many things on their plate, but now I think it's time that we can start work.
In view of the time, Ms. Santos, I hope you will forgive me if I forfeit the opportunity, unless you have a very particular point to make, which maybe lifts the veil a little bit on the report that we might expect from you later this year. If not, then yeah.
No, I don't want to go ahead on my report for now, as you understand.
Yeah.
We have a proper moment to do that. It's not on this forum, but I would only underline the importance of these reforms that are ongoing on the country and how much this will condition the future of the country and future of the Albanian people. This is very important, and of course, this is an effort that needs comprehension, understanding, and needs our cooperation. It's what I would like to underline at this moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Those are, I think, also very good words of hope to end on this webinar. I apologize for having briefly overrun the allotted time. I hope it doesn't disturb with your further programs today. But I would like to thank again on behalf of the EBRD and SEPS Ministers Gjonaj and Balluku for their keynote presentations and responses to the questions from our audience. And of course, Charlotte Ruhe and Isabel Santos for their comments and observations. I understand there will be an MOU in the making between the EBRD and Albania on the issues that we've touched on. So we look forward to seeing that being put into action if and when it arrives. With that, I would like to thank our audience for their participation through their questions in the chat box and the Q&A section of this platform. And I would welcome all of you back at the next event, which we will co-host, hopefully live after COVID times in Brussels or indeed in the region. With that, thank you very much. Stay safe and enjoy a relaxing summer. Bye.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.